and welcome to Publishing Essentials for LitMags, a series of webinars created to deliver a foundation in business skills for arts, literary, indie, and other small magazines. My name is Joyce Byrne, and it's my pleasure to produce Publishing Essentials on behalf of the Alberta Magazine Publishers Association. In today's lesson on advertising sales, we are pleased to welcome Trevor Battye, the founder of Trevor Battye Advertising Sales. Trevor has been providing client-driven advertising and monetization strategies for festivals, events, and media brands for over 15 years. His clients include the Alberta Teachers Association, the Tyee, and the Vancouver Writers Festival. In addition, he is a sessional instructor in the publishing program at Simon Fraser University. Welcome, Trevor. Over to you.
Thanks, Joyce. It's great to be here. And so I'm Trevor Battye. In part 2 of the session, I'm going to talk to you about digital opportunities and some sort of quick and easy ways you can work with those, as well as bundling, as well as we'll briefly touch on some sponsorship opportunities. So for many, your e-newsletter is often growing faster than your print publication, and your digital audience is often, as a result of that, growing faster than your print. And largely that's because for the majority of folks out there, particularly in the literary space, you're not putting your content behind a paywall. That content is free to subscribe to, and e-newsletters are becoming a great opportunity to engage directly with your audience, particularly given the challenges that many folks are having in the social media space. So I highly recommend to people developing some sort of an e-newsletter, and then once you have that up and going, monetizing that. The great thing about your e-newsletter is that for your advertisers, it provides often more timely opportunity for them to engage your audience. So, your typical literary arts magazine comes out anywhere between 1 to 3 or 4 times a year, depending. You'll have a fall, a winter, a spring, and sometimes you'll have a summer. Whereas your e-newsletter, that ideally comes out monthly. Some people do a weekly one. At the Tyee, I work with them, and we have a daily newsletter and then a weekly newsletter on top of that. We have a whole e-newsletter team. So, depending on your capacity, having a newsletter is a great way for your advertisers to reach your audience more frequently and in between print issues at a more timely opportunity. And then when we talk about bundling, we talked a little bit about this in the last session, but bundling is really a great opportunity to provide additional value to your advertisers. And one of the great things about bundling is that much of our lives are already bundled, right? So you can really tap into all the marketing that's already gone on for people in terms of bundling, whether that's McDonald's or Rogers, everybody wants bundling. And one of the things that bundling does that I think is really important is it gets you thinking about the bundle price and stops you thinking about the individual price of those items. So, I was recently at a McDonald's and I just wanted the cheeseburger. And I was sort of curious about the way the interaction went. I pull up to the drive-through and they said, "What can we get you?" First they said, "Are we collecting points?" And I was like, "No, I'm not collecting points at McDonald's." And then they said right away, "What would you like?" And I said, "I'd like a cheeseburger, please." And they said, "Will that be a meal?" I was like, "No, I just want the cheeseburger." And they said, "Well, the meal is only an extra," and I forget what it was now. But immediately, I started thinking about this, and it's like, right, our entire lives are bundles, whether that's any part of your life. Everybody wants to bundle that for you because it's easy and it feels good and you save money and all these things. So you can bring all of that logic to this kind of a setting when you're selling advertising. Pricing. I generally recommend, if you're starting with an e-newsletter, you want to start your pricing low and lower than you would expect it to be, because you can always raise pricing. It's very difficult and can often send the wrong message to your advertisers that your ad is overpriced if you start really high and go lower. So this is going to require a bit of research on your part. Look at what other folks in the similar space are charging for that e-newsletter. You always want to compare apples to apples. So CPM is a great way to do that. I generally recommend to folks start with a CPM of $25. Now, some of you may be going, well, what's even the point of this if we're going to start so low? CPM of $25 gives you an insertion price of 75 bucks. Now, you can always raise that once you've built demand. And I also suggest people start with one position. Part of the reason for starting with one position only is you don't also want to overwhelm the people or person, in many cases, putting together your e-newsletter. You want to build demand, and then once it gets to be an easier part of the workflow for people producing the e-newsletter, and once you've built demand and you're selling out, a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance, then you can make the case that we either need to add more frequency in our newsletters or we need to add more positions per newsletter. Generally speaking, I recommend adding a second position as opposed to increasing a whole other newsletter. Again, thinking about how much work that's going to be for the person who does your newsletter. It's often easier to add a second position, ad position, than it is to add a whole other newsletter that they have to think about. But really the goal of all of this is to get some early adopters, and you want those early adopters to be able to prove what that e-newsletter does for them in terms of performance. We'll talk about analytics in a couple of minutes here. And so really you need some people who are first in. In terms of who those people should be, I generally like to offer it to the largest advertisers. Psychologically, they have the money because they're already your biggest advertisers. And, if you are looking at somebody who's buying a fairly large print campaign, it's a nice moment to be able to say to them, hey, we're launching our e-newsletter. I need some people to try it out. Would you be interested in trying it out? It's only 75 bucks. And if that 75 bucks feels like too much for them, find out what they could afford. I don't generally recommend giving the first one away for free, although if it comes to that and you want to, they're also up for renewing their campaign, it's a nice value add to be able to say, oh, we'll give you a couple of e-newsletters as part of the renewal package. Because again, you need people who are going to be able to prove, hey, this works, or it does fairly well for people. You want to also then think about different kinds of advertising that you can offer in an e-newsletter. And I've got some examples here. So if we look at, there really are kind of two types. One is display ads. So this is the Brick e-newsletter. We talked about Brick in the first session as well, so you can refer back to that for more info about Brick. One of Canada's leading literary magazines. This is their e-newsletter. What I will say about e-newsletter advertising is it's often a way for stories to be broken up and get people to continue reading further down the e-newsletter. So Bricolage, their e-newsletter, starts out with a great piece here. You can then click through to the website to read the rest of it. Another editorial piece, then an ad for ordering your copy of Brick. This could also be an ad for an advertiser, but you want, 2 or 3 editorials and then an ad, and then one more editorial. Oh, and then look, a nice little banner ad for Carl Phillips, Diane Seuss, the Canadian finalists for poetry. There we go. And then some more editorial, and then a subscribe and a donate button. So using ads to kind of, as you would in the magazine, as a natural break between content stories. One of the things you have to decide when you're thinking about what kinds of ads to put in your e-newsletter is, do you want something like this that's a box that's meant to be clicked on? Or do you want something that is more text-based with image that looks more like an editorial item? And I'll give you an example of that. This is the Weekender. This is the Tyee's new, we launched this end of last year, end of 24. And the Weekender is our independent arts and culture section. Our founder, Dave Beers, was also the editor at Mix, which was a print section of the Vancouver Sun that just covered arts and culture. And Dave had the very wise idea to turn our weekend pages at the Tyee into arts and culture pages. This is a campaign we did for Mubi for their film, The Mastermind. So we have this position up here as part of this, and then it's also bundled with a position further down. Here's a little welcome message from Jackie Wong, our Weekender editor, talking about what you'll see on the Weekender this weekend. Little share this newsletter with a friend, one editorial item, and then another ad for The Mastermind on Mubi and their special offer for Weekender readers to get 30 days free to stream The Mastermind on Mubi. And then more editorial items. We purposefully put this here in this position so that people keep reading. The ad performs fairly well. We'll get into some analytics in a minute. But again, with this kind of a thing, more and more people don't click on ads. So if you give them an opportunity to read a little bit about the particular thing that's being promoted and click to get 30 days free to try it out, that is often an ad that can be more effective. Some organizations just run this kind of an ad and not the top banner. That also works very well. But we really, when we launched this opportunity, we weren't sure what the audience would respond more to. So we gave people both. And again, because we only wanted one position per newsletter, we made the decision to make that position both a banner at the top and this piece in the middle in between editorial. The results have been pretty good. We've seen a fair amount of repeat business, particularly in the film category. So there's a couple of examples of different types of e-newsletter advertising. It really comes down to also a question with your e-newsletters of what sort of value are you providing to your audiences. And so when we think about e-newsletter advertising, one of the things we want to be aware of is how will readers respond and what information is valuable to them as readers. So when we think about new advertising opportunities, that's sort of the key thing, is what do readers want? And part of that, and it's probably obvious, is, if you're not providing value to your audience with the ads that you serve people, your audience will leave. We have really great data on this at the Tyee, that if we run an ad that our readers don't like, because many of our readers also make donations, they'll let us know that they don't like some. They'll write letters. There's a gentleman by the name of Ola who works at the Tyee, and he will get feedback from people right away saying, I didn't like this ad. What are you guys up to? I pay you XYZ a month, and you better not do this again or I'm going to stop donating. So, it's really important to be able to showcase value. I'll give you an example of how we demonstrate that value. This is the MusicWorks Festival preview. It's great. And all that it is an opportunity for all of the festivals that advertise with us to get a paid content listing in our newsletter. Readers love this because it often talks to them about festivals they don't normally hear about or are familiar with. Our newsletter folks love it because aside from this little box up there that says get your ears moving, they don't have to write very much because all of these are paid listings. And from an ad side, we love it because we're able to put a number of paid listings together in an e-newsletter, and everybody pays. Little side note about paying: the people who are the first position pay more because it's the top spot in the e-newsletter. It also is visible in the first screen when you open the e-newsletter, so they pay more. But then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we've taken 9. We landed on 9 kind of on purpose / happy accident. We originally had more positions available, but it was one of those things where when we put more into it, we ended up sort of looking at the thing and reading it as readers. And there were way too many, and people didn't go all the way to the end. So we've limited it now to 8 or 9. Notice there's no ad per se. There is a link to the website, and then we also hyperlink this image. And it performs fairly well. It generates a significant amount of revenue for the publication. There's not very much workload in terms of setting all this up. It's a template now. This is the third year they've run this, I believe, maybe a little longer than that. And so it's great. And the readers love it. We get feedback all the time about how people weren't aware of certain festivals. They use it to decide what festivals they're going to and buy tickets, on and on and on. So it's a neat opportunity all the way around, sort of a win-win-win for everybody. I have seen similar kinds of opportunities done as like a summer reading opportunity. So you give people the opportunity to submit a book cover and a brief blurb about the book, and there's your summer reading opportunity. I have seen people, things like Poetry Day, International Poetry Month is coming up in April. You could do a here's 10 poetry books we're excited about, book cover, little blurb, very easy. I have some colleagues in the food space who do this for restaurants. Also works very well. It's, again, a way to find those advertisers that you have a bunch of and group them together. Important to label it. It says right here, paid content. Make sure you're being transparent about that, but a very sort of quick and easy way to get people on board. And then we'll look at a sample pitch letter for this. If you want to see more about pitch letters, go to the first half of this presentation. We talk about what a good pitch letter does. This sort of follows that format. I am contacting you about our annual special events preview. It's an excellent opportunity to connect with our audience. The festival preview is sent to our subscribers, posted on our blog, promoted on our social media. And so here's the size of the audience. We're at about 3,000 e-news subscribers. We have 6,000 plus on the web, and we have 5,000 plus on our social media. Here's the booking deadline. What can be promoted: festivals, major concerts. Open the opportunity up, because some people will come to you and say, well, I don't have a festival, but I have a big concert. Can I do that? Yes, absolutely. We will take your money. And then what do they need to provide? Again, make this as easy as possible. 200 by 200 image related to your event, a 250 word description, and a URL. All of this has to be supplied no later than April 1st. We have a pretty long lead time for this, so we try and get the first people in as quickly as possible. Here's the pricing. We have a regular spot, then we have a regular plus, which includes an e-newsletter ad separate from the festival listing, and then we charge more for the top spot. On the back end, you can feed all of this into a Google form, so that when people submit, they submit to a Google form. That way you don't have people, just sending you emails with all this in it. That can be a bit clunky. Makes it really easy for your production people. They check it on the production end. They will check everything, make sure there's nothing crazy in there or untoward, shall we say, and then it goes right into the e-newsletter. Over time, as the opportunity builds demand, You can increase the pricing. As your e-newsletter grows, you can increase the pricing and really kind of scale things up as you as an organization grow. The final thing I will show you, which is sort of an easy opportunity to dip your toe into the sponsored content opportunity. At the Tyee, we've been working with a dedicated email that is entirely sponsored content. You do have to be careful with these, so I will preface this by saying you want to limit the number of these you do in a particular month. You also want to limit the number of these a particular advertiser does over a certain period, because when you do these, people are sensitive to them. Advertisers really love them and they perform pretty well. So, the temptation from advertisers is to say, well, that was really great. Let's do another one. What's next week like? What you find is that if you do these too often, the audience starts to get mad and they'll say, oh, I got that offer last week. Why am I seeing this again? I already signed up or I already subscribed. And there's a lag between when that person signs up and when that advertiser actually receives that sign up in this case. So you really want to manage that with the advertiser. I would say one every 2-3 months is really kind of where you want to limit it for advertisers. I wouldn't do more than one of these a month because your audience will start to push back. This is a dedicated email that went out to our list at the Tyee. All of these people, when they signed up for our newsletter, have opted in to receive this kind of promotional information from our advertisers. At the Tyee, we really focus on limiting who we let advertise. The psychology behind that is pretty simple. The more we're able to curate who advertises in the Tyee, the better the ads perform. In this case, Mubi, as part of a larger campaign, we included this. This is the first time we worked with Mubi, so I was a bit concerned about how the audience would respond, but the response was really good, and it was interesting as a team. Once this came out, we sat around and people were like, that was really great. Some of our editorial folks and our publisher were like, that was really cool. That seemed to do really well. Our e-newsletter editor got some feedback from folks being like, oh, I really enjoyed this and whatever. And I said, yeah, I was on the fence about it. And they're like, oh no, we really saw value in this. That was great. And a couple of folks on our team actually signed up for the 30-day free trial. So it was a pleasant surprise. But again, you really have to be careful how you treat these. We say very clearly at the top here, this email was sent by the Tyee on behalf of Mubi. Why? You're getting this message because you're on the Tyee email list. We're sending this as part of a promotional partnership. You can expect messages like this rarely, no more than once a month, likely less, and only from partners with messages of broad interest to Tyee readers. The contents of this email do not imply an endorsement or a position taken by the Tyee. Our lawyer wanted us to include that, and so we will always keep your email address to ourselves and have not shared it with our partner. There you go. And you can always unsubscribe. We don't see too much of that, but again, if we're providing value to the readers, they don't seem to get too upset. Analytics, gone are the days where you could just not provide any analytics. When I started in magazine advertising quite some time ago, people didn't even ask to see the reporting. Now, if people pay for something and it gets sent out, if you don't send the reporting with the invoice, you will get an email saying, oh, looks like you didn't provide reporting. Can I get that from you when you have a minute? That is the softer version of this. The harder version of it is, I'm not paying this until I see reporting. The good news is that MailChimp provides reporting for you. So this is a screenshot of our Weekender email. This provides all the reporting that you need. We generally send a digested version of this to clients because it comes with other reporting. It comes with web reporting in the case of the Tyee because we also report on their website ads. It comes with other kinds of relevant information to that advertiser. What was traffic like that week for the site as a whole? Did we break any cool stories? How did all of that work out? If you're using MailChimp or another service to send out your emails, it automatically provides this reporting for you, and you can share that with advertisers to give them a sense of how their ad is performing. You want to provide this again with the invoice, and you really want to manage expectations around this. Advertisers often want to know, well, how does this compare to other emails that you've sent out? And it's very tricky to manage that, because particularly if it's the first time somebody is advertising with you, it's difficult to expect that people are going to be as excited about this messaging as they would be if you were a longtime advertiser that your audience really felt like they had a relationship with. So you want to always couch any kind of how did this do in the broader context of, is this the first time somebody's advertising with you? Did they have a clear call to action for the ad itself? What were their expectations? How do you compare to other ads those folks are running? How does that reporting kind of measure up to other publications? But how do we compare apples to apples if they're running campaigns in other similar media, similar size e-newsletters? How does that compare? So that's crash basics on reporting. And again, and I can't stress this enough, you really do need to be sharing reporting and get familiar with your reporting before you start selling, because nobody loves that feeling of, you have a campaign with an advertiser, then they ask for the reporting and you're like, what do you mean? Well, I don't know what to send them. Most email services will provide you with reporting. Okay, so now let's talk about bundling. Bundling is wonderful. I thoroughly enjoy bundling. We're trying here to tap into something that runs, for the large part, people's lives, whether it's McDonald's or Rogers. Bundling is all around us. You might as well take advantage of that logic. This is the brick pitch letter around this, and I'll come back down here. In the first presentation, we talked a lot about this section, but I want to focus in on the second half of this letter now, which is boost packages, we call them. You can call them whatever you think fits with your brand and your magazine. I've called them bundle opportunities. I did at one publication we worked with briefly. It was a food publication, and I called them value meals, and people got a real kick out of it. At least most people did. Some of the fine dining restaurants we were dealing with were like, we don't like value meal, Trevor. And I was like, what would you like me to call it? And they were like, prefix menu. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I just changed it in the title when I sent them pitches, and it said prefix pricing, and they were like, that's better. I was like, yeah, I listened to you. We can call this whatever you'd like to call it. Anyway, boost package. So what we've done here for Brick is we've included a selection of all of their opportunities. So in this case, a half-page print ad, 3 e-newsletter ads, and 1 month on the website. The key to bundling is to not only include the bundle price, but also to include the value, because advertisers want to see how much extra value they're getting if they were to buy those items separately. So in this case, with the print and digital boost, that is only at a cost of $984. That has a value of $1,300. We also offer a digital only package that has less value than the print and digital package, because we're trying to reward people based on the more money you spend, the more money you save. If that sounds familiar to you, it's probably because travel companies use it, all kinds of other companies. Rogers, I was talking to Rogers the other day because my cell phone is up. And they sent me an email saying the more you spend, the more you save. And I was like, this is really convenient heading into this presentation. So we do try and encourage print and digital together. We also have a digital package that is a month on the web, 2 e-newsletters, and our sponsored social media campaign. And then you also want to highlight the fact that the offer applies to new and recurring advertisers. You can also play around with this and offer a slightly better package to new advertisers. Just make sure and be prepared for the fact that your longtime advertisers will see that. And I strongly encourage you, if you launch an ad package for a new advertiser, if a recurring advertiser comes to you and says, hey, I notice you're doing all this for new advertisers, you're very quickly able to grandfather them into that or work out something else so that the advertisers who have been your long-standing clients also feel that they're important as well. You can play around with this depending on what your advertisers are working with in terms of budget. Some advertisers will say, well, if I bought a full page print ad, what could you do for me there? You can easily say, well, if you bought a full page print ad, we would give you 2 months on the web, or we would give you 4 e-newsletters, or, what would that look like for you? Where is your priority? Are you more interested in our e-newsletter, or are you more interested in the web? Recognizing, of course, that your e-newsletter opportunities and your web opportunities, there's not as much cost involved because your digital opportunities don't require any paper, ink, distribution, all of those kinds of things, right? And the other thing with packages is that when you present a couple of options like this, some folks will be more interested in the lower priced option. That's just the way it works. So you can, as an alternative, present one package and then just simply say, ask about other packages that will customize to fit your budget. So, the ideal scenario is one where an advertiser sees this print and digital option, comes to you and says, well, actually, I've got $1,700 or $1,800. What can you do for me? Oh, well, we can put together a custom package. What times of year do you want to be in market? All of those kinds of things. If somebody comes to you and says, well, I only have $500. I was looking at this digital boost package. I've only got $500. What can you do for me? You can decide at that point. I generally don't like to fight people over, $50 or $40. You could just give it to them, especially if they're looking to be a first-time advertiser or something like that, or if they've been a long-time client. You could just say, listen, we're not going to fight over $40. I value your business. Here's the package at $500. We'll make it work with your budget. The more flexible you can be with these, the better it's going to work for your advertisers, because really, once you get people onto this sort of package, they will continue to do it as long as they're seeing value. That's how to do that in a pitch letter. Just to sort of recap some keys to success. Important to recognize that digital has fewer hard costs. As mentioned, you're not paying for printing, you're not paying for ink, you're not paying for all those hard costs that we associate with print. There are some hard costs still. A digital person that I work with recently was like, yeah, Trevor, but just make sure when you talk about that, you tell people we still are paying the people's time to put out the digital opportunities. We're still paying a web person or a web team, depending on how many people you have. Yes, we're paying for those people's time. We value the time of e-news people and e-newsletter editors and copywriters, and all those people still have a value, but we're not paying for paper, which is increasingly a hard cost. Also, remember the key is to provide value to your readers, and you're really providing an opportunity for folks in between print issues. If you start your pricing low, once you build demand for the opportunity, you can then think about raising it and generating more revenue that way, as opposed to starting too high and coming back down. This bundling is another great opportunity to think about sponsorships. And so we'll touch briefly on sponsorships. I think sponsorships for literary magazines are a great untouched opportunity, underutilized opportunity for sure. And there's some things that literary communities and literary magazines value that are really important and that sponsorship can often unlock for you. So when we get into this, I think it's important to just kind of level set what we mean by a sponsorship. I got this from Investopedia. It's something that I talk about in other sessions when I teach at SFU. I talk about this, and it's just kind of what exactly is a corporate sponsorship. So Investopedia, great resource, says a form of marketing in which a company pays for the right to be associated with a project or a program. What that really means and what potential sponsors want is they want to take credit for whatever it is that you as a literary magazine are up to. At least they want to take credit for paying for it. That they will probably, many corporate sponsors will push that a little far and say, well, without our sponsorship, this program wouldn't exist. You can decide as an organization how much credit you want to give a corporate sponsor. As I say here, corporate sponsors want to take credit for the cool thing your magazine does. And we touched on this in the previous session, but one of the unique things about literary magazines in particular is that many of our readers are also writers, whether that's professional writers, whether that's wannabe writers, whether that's, writers at various stages. And for many literary magazines, what we've done to sort of take advantage of that is we've done some sort of writing contest. When I first started in magazines, I worked for a great magazine called Geist. This year, they're celebrating their 35th anniversary. So shout out to Geist and their 35th anniversary. And we had contests for everything. We had the famous 3-day novel contest that was highly successful. Then we had a postcard contest. Then we had various poetry contests that we ran with. And people loved to submit to contests. And contests were great because you paid an entry fee and you got a subscription, right? Great subscription driver. Well, one of the things that's great about contests is that contests also attract sponsors because it's this cool thing that your magazine does. What those sponsors wanted was they wanted to be part of all the cool marketing that we did for that contest. And we spent hours and hours and hours and hours marketing these contests, particularly in their first year. And so the first thing that I always tell people when they're looking for sponsors for their contest is you want to make a list of all the ways you promote your contest. E-newsletters, exchange ads. The only time I believe an exchange ads is when you're promoting a contest. Some circulation people are going to freak out when I say that, but that's fine. Both in print and on the web, if you're doing exchange ads for your contest, you want to include your sponsors on that. We'll get into some examples in a minute. Paid social. Lots of folks in magazines are spending money on paid social. Great. Make sure that you're including your sponsor of that contest as part of that paid social. And then do you have a dedicated landing page for your contest? And how can you include your sponsor in that? The more you're able to include the sponsor in these ways you're promoting the contest, the more it's going to make them feel like they're along for the ride. They're part of the journey of that contest, and they're able to take credit for that contest happening. We'll get into some examples. This is an ad for Geist in the Classroom. Geist in the Classroom provides copies of Geist to writing and publishing students across Canada. This is an ad that we ran in Geist. We also ran the ad in some like-minded literary magazines. And right down here at the bottom, Geist in the Classroom is free thanks to these generous supporters. And so they all gave us a sponsorship fee to be part of Geist in the Classroom. And as part of that, we promoted their support in exchange ads in other like-minded magazines. Here's another example. This is a workshop that we did. Readers of Geist want to be writers. We worked with longtime contributor Carolyn Adderson to create a workshop. This was at the Listel Hotel, which is an arts focused hotel in Vancouver. Carolyn Adderson, in addition to being a Geist contributor, is also on the faculty at UBC. I'm not sure if she's still on the faculty at UBC, but during this time she was. And so UBC actually came on board to sponsor the contest through the Department of Creative Writing. Highly successful, and we ran this ad not only in Geist, but in other like-minded literary magazines, Subterrane, Brick, Tattle Creek, many other literary magazines. And then when we showed the sponsor all the different ways we promoted it, we included a copy of the magazine with a little sticky on the page where the ad had appeared with their logo. And then the last one I'll show as an example here is prizing. Going back to prizing, this is a organization that I worked with earlier on in my career, the BC Book Prizes. And they had an Adopt a Library program. So organizations would donate $500 worth of BC Book Prize winning and finalist books to libraries across BC as part of the BC Book Prizes on tour. And so in this case, the gentleman holding the check with the glasses is Brian Pike. He was the executive director. The gentleman to her left is from one of the companies that donated the books to this particular school. Here's some kids from the school. You can go to Staples and get a big check made like this and take a picture like this. The cost of the check at Staples, I believe, is something like $50. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've also done this at writing contests when the sponsor gets to present the prize money to the winner. Take the picture, send the sponsor a copy of the picture in a nice frame, go to any dollar store, get a nice frame for a couple of bucks. The check is $50 to get from Staples. Send the sponsor of the prize, whether it's a school or presenting a prize money to a writer who's won prize money. It's worth 1,000 words. Sponsors love it. I have been to many instances where people who are in those roles have pictures either on their wall or on their desk, usually next to the picture of them pulling a marlin out of somewhere. And it's a nice moment, keeps you top of mind when it's time to renew that sponsorship. Thinking about how can you create a similar moment for sponsors of your literary prizes. I've yet to meet a sponsor who doesn't like presenting prize money to a winner of a writing contest. That concludes our second half. If you have questions, you can write me directly. There's my email. There's my direct phone number. Feel free to email or call. I do take phone calls as well. And thanks so much for your time. If you haven't had a chance, please go back and watch session 1 as well. Thanks.